Hi, this is Phoebe Blamey and welcome to the Happy Money Journey podcast for today. I'm really excited to have you here. I have spent most of my life working in financial services. I'm a qualified financial planner and I have my own mortgage broking business since 2006. I know that as a busy woman, it's really hard to get your life into some sort of shape. And so I'm here to help you on your own happy money journey. So I loved the parts. The parts are like my little buddies now. I know the parts. I know when they're popping up. Awesome. So yeah, it's really fun. So we talked about at the very beginning of my EMDR sessions, we talked about the parts of you that you have inside you that kind of protect you and look after you. And mine was a freak show of circus animals and aliens. And I loved it. Like I got so much out of that when I think that I'm kind of, you know, when you're conscious. One of the things that EMDR made me was much more in touch with my feelings, like how I feel about things and my needs, but also my feelings. So if I'm feeling something, I can almost feel that little part kind of rising up in me that is there to protect me or there to stop me being angry or there to, you know, make me behave in a particular way. And sometimes I just go, you know what, mate, I don't need you now. You can go. Or, yeah, this is appropriate. You can just... You can drive the bus for a second while I think this through, whatever. But it's interesting that now I recognise them. I know them. Don't have any kind of multiple personality situation going on here.
Definitely do.
It is those parts of you that you know that are inside you that, you know, you're the mother, you're the boss, you're the sister, you're the daughter, you're all those sort of parts, but they're
kind of your identities, and I think that we have identities which are kind of I guess roles that we play, and the parts, like I agree with you, I love the parts, and that's one of my favorite parts of my EMDR program, which is, I guess, something that I do differently, like, because I integrate EMDR and, oh gosh, if we want to get technical, the other part of it I integrate is schema, because I think that they blend so nicely together, and that's from, I guess, a psychological framework, which I won't delve into too much. But the idea is, I guess, as you said, like, when we grow up, we develop all of these different protective parts to help keep us protected. And like, if we imagine a child who comes from a family where they've had good enough parents who have been able to meet their needs most of the time, then they are able to kind of develop into this healthy, functioning adult who is able to navigate the world with good self-esteem, confidence, feeling positive about themselves, feeling positive about other people. When we come from kind of an environment where we have had some neglect, again, varies on that spectrum of how much trauma we've experienced, then we need to develop ways to keep ourselves protected, right? So if we think to that little 5-year-old who was abandoned by their parents, they forgot about them at school, and this is something that kind of happens frequently where their parents just kind of forget about them or don't see them, then they're going to develop this part of themselves that's kind of like, well, how can I keep myself protected from this really big emotion that I don't know what to do with? And
I love that. So my part for that was an alien, a really tall alien that was just devoid of emotion. And
I love it because...
And I drew it. I drew it as part of my therapy.
And that's why I laugh, because I can see it in my mind. Like, I could see Phoebe just like drawing as we were kind of going through the process. And, you know, but the thing is though, prior to doing the coaching with you, like, we hadn't actually, or you hadn't actually noticed that part or brought that part to life, because we just operate on autopilot a lot of the time in our life. And
I remember even as I was telling you that this is the part, I still didn't find it strange. It was sort of afterwards when I went, Am I a little emotionally disconnected sometimes? I've just put two and two together because it's that somewhere in that gap between that Thursday night when we did the session and the Saturday morning, because I'd done the drawings and I journal a lot, and I was looking back at them and I was thinking, now this is interesting. Really? And I was really, so that instead of making me nervous about what we were doing, it made me so curious about what we were about to be doing and how it would work and what would happen next, because that was to have that incredible shift. And for me, it's 3 months since I did it, and now I'm starting to implement some of the things in my business that I needed to be implementing, which is the taking up space and making improvements around the podcast and making just finishing stuff, and it is very much about that finishing stuff and getting stuff done. Next question is, you deal with a lot of women. I deal with a lot of women in our work. We predominantly, our service is predominantly for women, because women have a unique understanding of the way that we see the world, because we have a lot in common. I was talking to Josh about it this morning. Josh is our absolute technical guru, who's just come in about 3 times during this podcast and helped us fix things. One of the things that happened to a young woman in particular, and particular in the workplace, is 4 or 5 times a day you're walking around an office and someone tells you to smile. And your automatic thing that you do as a young woman, or the automatic thing that I did as a young woman, was smile. Smile. You look so pretty when you smile. Smile. Oh, why that face? Smile. All of those sort of things are quite a unique female experience. And it may seem like a little thing, but it actually informs us of being those people-pleasing, external-focused, I want to say almost shallow, where, that whole look, feel of, smile, because it's about what your face looks like, not the depth of your personality. Something like that. How much does that inform the things that you're doing when you're in therapy?
So much, because, and I think what you've just described is kind of why I decided that I wanted to move out of EMDR in the trauma psychology space and bring it into the coaching space, because the women that I work with in my coaching, I want to say they don't need therapy, right? I mean, look, a lot of them are in therapy, because they're self-development, they love the self-development, right? But they don't, sorry, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent.
Keep going.
So,
Sorry.
But I guess the thing is you're right, all of that social conditioning, that doesn't just happen in corporate. It happens way back when we're a child. Just as soon as it's known that you're going to be born a female, then automatically your life goes on a particular trajectory. And to break out of that is difficult, because life and people tell you have to go to school and you follow the rules at school, and you then go to high school and don't get good grades, be a good girl, don't rock the boat, be nice to your teachers, and then generally the trajectory, that's a mouthful, is to go to university, right? Go to university so that you can get a good job, but don't worry, you won't be in the job for a while, because you're going to get married to a man, and then you're going to have a baby, have the house, and follow that kind of trajectory. So when a lot of the times women that I work with want to break away from that mold, and because they're not happy. And so starting a business and kind of being in this space of, actually the corporate life doesn't suit me. I feel really boxed in. I'm unhappy. I want to start a business. But they bring with them all of this baggage from society, from, following the rules for such a long time, to then being like, well, now I want to step out of that mold. I want to create my own rules. But how do I do that when the world has told me to smile?
Yeah.
When I've had to follow all of this path, I guess.
Yep. And we know the same thing happens to men. Like, the same thing happens to men in a completely different way, where they have to be the hero and they have to be in charge of things and they have to understand things and know things. And one of the things that I say repeatedly when we're talking about money is that there's no age or gender that makes you better or worse with money. And I honour the men that are around us and all of those sort of... And so I honour the men that are around us and their own experience. But I think that as we are becoming a greater force, and I read this really interesting article when I was doing my MBA it was written in 1999, and it was about what a force the internet would become for women. And I'm really seeing that now. And it was almost like a prophet. It was like a prophet. Yeah, it was almost like a prophecy. And it was really interesting to see that because we need those circles of connection, this is the very best place for us to find it. And that's how I found you. I found you through Jules Brooke and the interview that you'd done with her on one of her spaces. And we find each other and make all these connections. And those connections are making us very powerful, I feel like. And so when you're doing these things that are unblocking us, it's not just the service to the single person, it's the service to the everyone. And
oh my gosh,
as we rise, everyone rises, right?
And that, like, you have nailed why I do what I do and the impact that I hope to make. Because the thing is, what I believe is, like, I want societal change. I want global change. But I think that change needs to come from within first, because what I personally think is that if we kind of are walking around with our own traumas and our own view of ourselves as we're not good enough, we're not worthy, then how are we going to create an impact? How are we going to be able to create a business that is highly profitable? And why am I so concerned about profit? Because men take up 98% of that space, right? And yes, like you were saying, men have their own social conditionings and whatnot that they're exposed to. But it does come, I think, from the individual, because then it ripples out into wider ripples of change.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And that's why, for me, empowering women around their money is the most important work I can do. It's stuff that I know, it's stuff that I've been through, it's stuff that I really want to take other women through, because when I'm looking at female business owners, I'm looking at them from the perspective of they could be this and they decide to be this, because if they have to be any bigger than that, then they have to employ staff, they have to do this, they have to do that. And we've got all this mental conditioning about our ability as a leader, our ability to get on with other women. That was a big thing. Probably not so much now for the generation but behind me, but that was a big thing, was, more than 2 women in the room, and, it was going to be a disaster because I was so used to coming up in that very male orientated thing. I've been the only woman in so many roles and in so many businesses. And as I was saying before, that's where you get all that masculine energy, which isn't, it has its uses, but it's not going to let me do my best work. And that was one of the things that I really let go of with the EMDR. And so, as we're talking about money, what is one of your money stories, tips, something that we can give to our people?
It's so interesting because we were talking about this before hitting the record button, and I was sharing with Phoebe one of my own, I guess, stories around money. And it fascinates me how the energy that we kind of put out into the world is what we receive back, and how these familiar patterns that we play can kind of come back, kind of keep repeating over and over. So I guess the thing that I would think about is work on your money stories. It's just as important to understand your relationship with money, to understand the patterns that you have around money, to understand your history with money, because it's likely that there's a subconscious block there as well. And my story this morning was, I was saying to Phoebe, I'm like, I just got my tax return back, and like a couple of days later, like I knew it would because it's happened so many times in the past, an unexpected but big expense came up. I blew a tire, and I'm like, oh. And I'm like, but I knew, it's like clockwork. I'm like, a big influx of money comes in, and then boom, a big influx goes out. And so for me, that's kind of this reminder to myself that I need to work on my own money story. And that's my tip to you, is that we need to be working on this as well, particularly as women, where we might have our own beliefs around money.
And we really do have our own beliefs around money. And I always find that absolutely so interesting. And it's probably one of the subconscious blocks that you take away from people when they do the EMDR. But it's also that the particular thing that you're talking about, where money comes in and money comes out. I've always thought of people as having their money comfort level. And if they go over them, you've kind of got to raise your money comfort level every so often. You've got to raise your standards. You've got to be asking the universe for more, and you've got to be manifesting asking the universe for more, because otherwise that shit keeps happening. That is cyclical. I have watched that happen to so many clients, but I've also watched the opposite, where someone has come out of a divorce or come out of a really bad situation, or their business has gone flat, or something's happened, and within a year they're back to the high level that they were at before. So it works in reverse as well. And it's something about keeping yourself at a certain comfort level that feels safe and feels good for you. And part of the thing that we do in our money makeover course is get to the bottom of some of those blocks and unblock them. So I'll give that to you to have a watch, so you can tell me what you think.
I definitely need that. And it's funny because, like, I think about it, you know, and this is, I think, something I just want to quickly add, because it's interesting, because I notice sometimes my own blocks coming up, and I find it interesting that I'm the person that helps you unblock your blocks, yet I still have my own blocks. And sometimes I'm like, I need a me for me, because we're always coming across, like, every time we up level, every time we hit a new income ceiling, or every time we want to kind of move forward in our business, we are going to come up against these blocks. And like you said, it's about that sense of safety, and how can we, and that's where EMDR, I think, comes in, because it helps us increase how safe we feel in our body, so that we can then achieve those next level things.
So can you be your own therapist? What would be your solution to that?
It's interesting because one of the things that I'm in the process of developing at the moment is kind of this self EMDR course, because what I want to do, and what I have been doing for myself, is kind of self EMDR, where, because like I said before, you can do things like butterfly hugs or tapping, and I want to help guide other people through that process as well. So I try and do EMDR on myself, but I think sometimes it can be really nice to be held through that process as well. So column A, column B.
Yep. I liked doing all of that with you. You are an amazing human to work with.
Thank you.
I found that whole situation so comforting. I felt it really opened me up, and I really like the result. I really like the freedom that result's given me. I think it's been such an incredible change, and such a happy thing to have done, really. More grateful, I think, more in touch with, as I said before, my emotions and all that sort of stuff. What would be one thing that you would say to people that are wanting to do it before they come and see you, or when they come and see you? What would they expect?
I'm not quite sure I understand.
So I had no expectations, when I came to see you. What would be something that you'd need to tell people, or are they better coming in with less expectation?
I think it's helpful for people to come in knowing that, like, not with no expectations, but I think people coming in with an open mind, because I think sometimes we can come in and want something in particular, and they're like, I want this particular outcome, and it's like, well, I don't know that we're going to get something specific. I know that there's going to be something that will happen, but it will look different for everyone. And coming in with an open mind can be really wonderful, because it then kind of allows us to do the work. I find that when people are closed off and they're like, oh, don't know about this. It just means that they've got those protective parts around them that, you know, might require a little bit more nurturing and a little bit more care. But I think that it can benefit anyone. And I think the thing is that people often underestimate how helpful EMDR can be. And it's funny because I talk with a lot of women at networking events and I explain what I do and they're like, oh, that sounds really wonderful, cool. And they don't see that it can help themselves, which is probably me, and I need to work a little bit more on how to explain it better. But at the same time, then we start talking about things like their inner critic and their perfectionism and their people pleasing. And they talk about it as though those things are normal and that's just the way they are. And I'm like, no, actually, it doesn't have to be that way. Just because those feelings have been there for such a long time, it doesn't have to feel that way forever. We can actually remove that. We can unblock that. And imagine what you could do if actually your perfectionism, people-pleasing tendencies disappeared.
How much easier it would be. So if you're going to do a column A, column B, you can do it yourself or you can do it with you, as you were talking about a second ago, developing that. How would that work for someone if they didn't have your nature as part of their therapy?
Yeah, so self-EMDR is, I guess, the way that I kind of like to do that is if I've had something kind of upsetting that's happened, like mildly upsetting, I wouldn't do something like super traumatic. I'd, go to have someone alongside me for that. But let's say that I had a situation where recently I felt let down by a friend, and I was like, okay, I'm noticing this really strong feeling coming up for me. I'm feeling really disappointed, which was a very appropriate emotion.
Yep.
But it was distracting me from getting shit done.
Yep.
And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to let myself be with that emotion, but I'm also going to give myself a butterfly hug. And I just sat there and butterfly hugged myself whilst that feeling was there, just to kind of help, I guess, self-soothe in a way, but it also kind of helped neutralize the memory a little bit and helped me process the feeling. So rather than kind of holding on to it and holding on to the intensity of that emotion, it helped kind of just reprocess it. So just noticing that when we sometimes have an upsetting memory, tapping into the butterfly hug can just be a really nice way of doing that.
I love that. I know that one of the things that when we've experienced that kind of childhood trauma that we've taken through into adulthood, one of the things that we're not very good at doing is self-soothing. And I have been able to identify things like that since I've been, as someone has let me down, and that's an appropriate emotion. To feel disappointed is an appropriate emotion. Because I think one of the other things that I had going on for me was I'd have an emotion that wasn't necessarily appropriate to and I was speaking about that earlier, the high level anger, the something that was just totally out of kilter with what was actually going on. And so I love that tip.
It's really nice. And I think that's like also what I do after. So we kind of, there's two parts to it. Well, like I said before, there's like 8 phases to it. But one of the parts of EMDR is kind of neutralizing the upsetting things. But then another part that I love is kind of extending on that and really solidifying, because it changes your brain. Like it's not, there's no fucking around here. Am I allowed to swear? Sorry, I just realized.
Swear.
There's no fucking around. Like this actually changes the neural pathways of your brain and rewires them. So going into, I guess, the science behind EMDR or the science behind the brain, like our brain thrives on associations and it loves creating familiar, quick pathways to make decisions, right? And if we build up all of these kind of negative associations with things, like, again, going back to that 5-year-old being abandoned at school, and then we have another situation where, I don't know, maybe it's I'm thinking of an experience that I had actually where my mum had gotten a friend to come and pick me up from school rather than herself. But because I'd had some of those experiences of being neglected by my own mum, having this friend come and pick me up also felt like I was being abandoned by my mum. And So I built up this association that, people can't be trusted. And when we have a bunch of those experiences, plus this associated belief, because we don't just have experiences, we associate meaning with them. We associate the meaning with them, that becomes like a little negative bundle. But then as soon as another situation happens, our brain goes searching, okay, what's something familiar that this reminds me of? And then it goes, boom, oh, that memory over there. Okay, so we're going to add this new memory to that existing negative pile of memories. And then all of a sudden we've got this really strong pathway to those negative memories. And what we don't have is other experiences that we've had where we haven't been let down, where we have had people that we can trust. Those memories kind of get thrown to the side and they're a little bit mismatched. And when we rewire the brain, we kind of untangle the negative memories and release those and rewire some of those more adaptive, positive memories that we've had. I don't know. I think I went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
I like that tangent though, because that tangent was very much how I felt when I was doing a whole lot of things. And I think it's important to know, it's not to set up people's expectations to be too high or too low, but to have some sort of understanding of the complexity of our own minds and how entering into something like EMDR can really actually change our brains. And as you were saying it, I was thinking of like 300 examples of no longer feeling like this, where I would have felt like this before. So we should probably end this, because I feel like we've been talking for hours and hours and hours, because you're just so interesting. So how do people get in touch with you? What are their next steps if they want to take something like this on?
Yeah, so I'm all over Insta, loving the gram. So come hit me up over there if you want to follow along and see what I'm up to. But talking all things money, I actually have a quiz which your audience might love, which is around how to, are you emotionally ready for 7 figures in your business? Because yeah, it's such a good quiz.
Oh, I love that.
And it kind of links your emotional readiness to kind of what we've been talking about in terms of the money exchange that we have, or the relationship that we have with money. So if you want to know your money archetype, your emotional archetype, and whether you're emotionally ready for 7 figures,
that will be in our show notes. We will promote that all over the place. That is absolutely gold. I love that.
You'll have to take it, because I'm curious to see what now, after EMDR, where you fall on the spectrum.
Definitely going to take that. So thank you very much for sharing with us. That will be on our show notes. Anyone that wants to get in touch with Eloise, you will find her on Instagram, and you will be able to connect with her through that quiz. So next time, and until then, enjoy your journey.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. My name is Hannah, and I am the producer of this podcast, along with Joshua Dean Graham. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we live and work, and pay our respects to the ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. We are grateful and honoured to live on this land and pay homage to the traditions of storytelling, communities, and the connection to land. Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Disclaimer. Just a reminder that the advice that's contained in this podcast is general in nature. It doesn't take into account your individual needs and circumstances, and we recommend considering the appropriateness of any advice to your individual circumstances and needs. We always recommend seeking the advice of an expert before making any financial decisions.